Hey everyone, so I'm going to review quickly Strategic and Operational Planning, Chapter 4. So this chapter wraps up our planning process overall, and obviously planning is one of the most important tasks anyone can do in terms of your day, your work schedule, what you have to do to accomplish goals and objectives. Planning, your book will talk about three major benefits in terms of decision making, better management of resources, and action steps in order to reach those goals. So last week we talked about decision making, and this falls into that planning as well. So strategic planning is this management that develops a system and long-term objectives to determine how a certain product or organization will be successful. Let's say a launching of a new product, launching of a new brand, those types of things. You need strategic planning in this process to be successful. Operational planning is the management of short-term objectives and determines in advance how they will be accomplished. So the two work together in various ways. So figure 4.1 has a really good sort of map here about strategic planning and how you develop a mission along with the 5 other steps in terms of analyzing the environment, setting the objectives, developing strategies, and implementing and controlling those strategies. Obviously, it's not linear, so that's why they all coincide. So, your book will also talk about the 3 levels of strategies: corporate, business, and functional. So, situational analysis, obviously, it's those in the company environment, it draws out the strategic window and options and opportunities. So, we take a look at our situation and we analyze what is the best route to take, where we are now, and where do we need to go. So, there's 3 parts to this. You obviously have this analysis of a company's industry and its competition. Then you have the particular situation, and then you have the competitive advantage or lack thereof. So these are the 3 parts of the situational analysis, which lead into what you all will be doing in terms of the 5 competitive forces to those. So using those competitive forces, you want to see who you're competing with. Then you want to develop these products that may be either similar or better. And then who else can come into this competition? And then what is the bargaining power of your suppliers and consumers? So all that leads to these 5 competitive analysis, 5 forces rather, sorry about that, 5 forces. And your book gives you a figure of, so you can look at Nike's 5 competitive or 5 forces competitive analysis. And this gives you a really good overview in terms of rivalry, which is Reebok, or potential of development substitutes, which think about boots or how it's grown. It's not just a sneaker anymore, right? So you have sandals and those types of things. Potential entry of new competitors. So obviously there's new competitors every day. Talk about And One, or let's say, for example, Under Armour that has most recently come into play. And then the bargaining power. Obviously Nike has a great deal of bargaining power, and then the bargaining power of its buyers. So again, a great deal of power, because a large number can be switched in terms of, let's say, manufacturing for various reasons. So all these are your 5 competitive or 5 forces of competitive analysis that you will ultimately be doing, but this is just Nike's brief one. So another example is to take a look at this golf club industry and their competition. So Callaway competes with all these competitors, right? And then let's say Nike goes against Adidas and Reebok and Puma and Fila. And so all these companies need to anticipate moves that the other is doing without obviously knowing somebody on the inside. That's not how it works. You just have to be in anticipation of it. And then come up with these potential substitute products. So when we talk about planning, we're talking about, the book gives this example of the emergency or emergence of motorsports. So talk about WWE as well. Obviously, these sports go through spurts just like any other sports, but there's some sports that have always been on the rise and there's no substitute products, right? So again, these potential substitutive products is something that you have to plan for because, as your book will state, the NBA and NFL have really no competition other than themselves against each other. All these NASCARs and WWEs or others have a large amount of competitors as substitute products. So how do you develop them? Obviously, when a company they try to move into the market, you do your research, you plan for these things to happen, right? Your book will talk about the Crocs. I don't know if you all have Crocs, but obviously they've just most recently formed an alliance with the NFL and NCAA to have Crocs that are team related. So that's how they substituted, so to speak, and planned and had a different product. Now, the bargaining power of consumers, this is tricky. And why this is so tricky is because obviously it depends on the situation. Are you going to find the same product quality for a cheaper price? Most likely. And that is the bargaining power of consumers. Loyal consumers, obviously, if they're loyal to Nike and you just thrive on Nike, you're always going to buy Nike. Those are, of course, one part of this bargaining power. The other part is that competitive nature or situational nature. So if I find an equally, um, an equally, let's say an equal vacuum that picks up the floor or picks up dust from the floor as the same as another one that's $400, and I'm looking at one that's 100, most likely I'm going to buy the one that's 100. So when planning process, you have to be aware of these things. What makes your product stand out? What makes your organization stand out to where you're not competing or the price does not have anything to do with the bargain because you're getting the product. And then this bargaining powers of suppliers. So of course, becomes the organizational part of it, using other countries and whether this is, kosher or not, using other companies to build your product. What is going to be the most bang for your buck, so to speak? And that's pretty much the bargaining power of suppliers, because that ultimate day and the ultimate goal here is to make the most money possible for a product that doesn't cost you as much to make. So your book also has figure 4.4 and talks about the step in analysis of the company situation. Obviously, you can see here, this part includes a SWOT analysis, competitive strength assessment, right? So what's our competitive advantage? Then you draw those conclusions and then you determine the strategic problems that need to be addressed. So this is what basically the chart that you're going to use to gain that competitive analysis, or not competitive analysis, but the steps in what's the situation of your company right now. What do you need? Where are you going? So again, competitive advantage. Again, what makes us different? Why should a person buy one product over another? It's extremely important to know goals versus objectives. Goals are targets to be accomplished. Objectives are what you want to accomplish, and they're measurable, and they give you a certain date. But goals are ultimately finite, right? Did you accomplish those goals? Then there's grand strategies, which your book will talk about, or the chapter will talk about, in terms of growth, stability, turnaround, and then some combination of those. These are your corporate growth strategies, all 6 of them. So you have obviously your concentration, your mergers, your acquisitions. These get a little more into the nuts and bolts of the planning process in terms of how are you going to grow, what are you going to develop, those types of things. And then lastly, just to kind of finish up here, you have this business portfolio analysis, which again seems a little bit boring and cumbersome, but this is basically how corporations determine which line of business they're going to follow and where they want to allocate resources among those various lines. So it's called the strategic business unit for a reason. Again, it's not too elaborate or, not too exciting, but these are important decision making and planning decisions. I like the figure here because it shows you to the left end, you're kind of integrating away from the customer, the whole manufacturing part, and then the right end is about the customer. So this is the long landslide that you have to go through to get your product out there. And again, just to wrap up, business level strategies, you have adaptive strategies, you have competitive strategies here. You have this product life cycle. So you introduce it, does it grow, does it mature, does it and decline? So how are you going to revamp this? How are you going to keep up with this product life cycle? And then functional level strategies, your marketing, operations, finance, those types of strategies are functional level strategies. And lastly, just to kind of end here, at the end of your chapter, the authors give you this sport management professionals at work, just to kind of give you an overview. So I do hope you read these things, but I do want you to think about, Michael Kometa. So when the book talks about his story, what is his personal mission? How does that differ from the organizational mission? And would you understand the role of networking being hired for a mid-level corporate job? So again, some things to think about. I'm not going to make you do these, but these are important things to think about as you go into the sport management industry. Does your mission align with the organizational mission we talked about? Does, in the planning process, do you maintain that? Do you maintain that level of, strategy, but also social responsibility? So all these intertwine, these two chapters intertwine with the planning process overall in sport management.